Hello, it's Saturday the 13th of May 2017. Welcome to the Purple Army podcast, in association with Goldstone Wealth Management. This is episode number 93, and I am Ross McGregor. In this week's show, you'll have details of our competition to win a Mike Hammond playoff jersey. First off though, Jennifer and I have a chat with Stuart Coles from the Coventry Blaze media team about the new conference system.
If I had a break for every word that we forgot to say, everything you never told me, maybe I'd be building bridges now. Sometimes I feel like I am running out of time.
Jennifer and I are delighted to be joined by Stuart Coles from the Coventry Blaze media team. So, Stuart, you do the commentary on the webcast, and I think you edit the magazine as well, don't you, the Match Night programme?
Yeah, that's right. I do co-commentary on the webcast alongside Ed Kimberley, who does play-by-play. And then we have a monthly magazine called On Fire, which I've been editing for the past few seasons.
Yep, and I said earlier on when we were chatting about it, I thought it would be interesting, now that the conferences have all been set out and decided for next year, to get... I feel personally that Coventry are affected by this, obviously, to a different way, maybe to what we are. They're getting into a situation, I feel, there's one that Braehead have been in for the last few years, and I thought it would just be interesting to get Stu on and get his view. Obviously, we've heard that we're going into 3 conferences of 4, the kind of Scottish conference, if you like, which is self-explanatory, Braehead, Dundee, Edinburgh and Fife. The Arena Conference being Belfast, Cardiff, Nottingham and Sheffield. And the Southern Conference, albeit it's got Manchester in it, but also having Coventry, Guildford, Milton Keynes. 24 conference games, 8 by 3 for each of your conference teams, 32 non-conference games, which is 4 to home and 2 away. Top 8 seeded into quarter-finals. That appears to be as the league positions fall. However, there's that anomaly, which I don't know how possible it would be. I've not really got my maths on to work out yet. If a conference winner happens to finish 9th, though, they'll be guaranteed to get into the quarter-finals. That would be a strange one if it happened, but well, I don't know if it can... difficult. I'm going to have a wee look at that one. I'm sure there's guys like, which is Mr. Fairley, would have a look at that. I'm sure he built a couple of formula for that, but unlikely to happen, I would imagine. Challenge Cup, 4 groups as well, although the groups have kind of been mixed up. Belfast, Dundee, Edinburgh and Fife. Braehead, Manchester, Nottingham and Sheffield, and Cardiff, Coventry, Guildford and Milton Keynes. The top 2 going through from each of them, and what they're calling the top 2 runners-up. How that could be worked out again is down to the normal sort of league deciders, although some of them kind of depend on them being in the same group, so I don't know how that's going to work out. We could have problems with that as well going down. At the end of the day, we've had a lot of people on the Braehead side, they've got pros and cons to this for us. I don't know. Stuart, for Coventry, you have had to play against what we call the big teams, if you like, over the last... Coventry did have the day, I was looking back in the winners of the trophies over the last few years, but we'll maybe go into that later on. It's fair to say that I think Coventry and Braehead are kind of round about the same sort of spending power, albeit you've had this big arena teams you've had to play in the same conference. How has that kind of been in terms of the morale of getting people through the door, and the fact that you actually did have an increase in your attendances last year?
Yeah, it's been kind of odd because, so if you look at the morale of the club and the squad, it probably wasn't that great. I mean, there was stretches last season where, couldn't buy a win for love nor money, and people were getting quite down. It wasn't fun for the guys to play, because they were getting beaten week in, week out. They were trying hard, effort was there. It was just one of those things where it just didn't quite fall together. But then you look at the flip side, and the crowds were going up, and it was what you would describe as a complete anomaly, because you've got a team that was drifting through the season to 9th place and out of the playoffs, but yet one of the strongest attendances we've had for years. I mean, even more so than a couple of years ago when we went on to win the playoffs. You know, our attendances were stronger then. So I think, you know, a part of it is down to the fact that, yes, we were getting beaten, but some of the games were more entertaining. You know, there were some close games. There were some blowouts as well. You know, let's not try and hide it. But also as well, you know, the backroom staff of the club, the guys who working behind the scenes, getting fans in, put a lot of effort in this year to keep the attendances up. You know, going out to schools, all the sort of associated things that you don't normally see during the week, and that had a bit of a help as well. But you know, it's tough. You know, for us, it's been tough for us for the past couple of years.
Tough when you're losing more than you're winning, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think we managed. I think not this season just gone, but the season before. I think it was only 5 or 6 wins in conference the whole year. You know, it's tough to build a season off that.
Well, we had a tough time. We won our conference relatively early in the season, but we had a really tough time when we were playing cross-conference games. I think we ended up 2-2 versus yourself this year, but against Sheffield, I think we managed 1-1, but the wins were few and far between. And I don't know. I feel as if the gap between ourselves and, you know, maybe some of the top teams has got bigger, and a lot of the people up here, Jennifer, seem to think it's because of the conferences, because the bigger teams are playing each other more often. I don't buy into that, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But how do you feel about the three groups of 4, Jen?
I definitely, obviously I was beforehand a big fan of the 2 conferences of 6, but when you kind of have a look at, you would need to split up the teams, or you were going to have Belfast in the Northern Conference, and that was going to be hugely detrimental to them. So how they've worked it geographically, I think it's a lot better, but I think the big thing is mixing up the Challenge Cup the way that they have done with completely mixed groups. I think that definitely kind of makes it a bit more exciting, and obviously kind of gives us a couple more games against some of the big teams, which just makes it a little bit less repetitive, seeing the same conference people in the Challenge Cup as we do in the league. So I certainly think for us it mixes it up, but obviously you need to get a solution that's going to suit all 12 teams. I mean, obviously I don't doubt for a second that some of the teams aren't happy with part of it, but do you know what I mean, we couldn't really find ourselves in a situation, as the rumour goes, that we were having 3 Scottish teams saying we're not doing it. Do you know what I mean, you need to grow the league, so the fact that the compromise is going to keep us with the 12 teams, then it's definitely the way to go forward.
I think it's all about sustainability for me. If the teams are sustainable, then I think we should do everything to keep them in the fold. It's when, you know, and there's all these rumours going about Manchester being financed a little bit, you know, they're struggling. When we had the original conference, Stuart, Hull geographically should never have been near the Gardner Conference, but, you know, I mean, what you're led to believe, the sponsorship deal with Rapid Solicitors, kind of, some of that went to them as a compensation as such, because of the miles they were travelling. For us up here, I mean, a lot of people have started saying, I don't want to see the Scottish teams anymore. You know, last year, 50% of our schedule, if you include all the games, the Challenge Cup games, 50% of our schedule was against other Scottish teams. Next year, under the new system, 39%. We dropped 6 games against Scottish teams, so you'll see them less, actually. And certainly outside the conference, we had 38 games, and this year there'll be another 38 as well outside the conference. The other 61% are going to be made up by the other 2 conferences, and if you include the fact we're going to see Nottingham, Sheffield and Manchester, which is different to the conference we're in terms of the league, to me that kind of makes up for it. And it's not going to be quite as repetitive. The cash cow thing about Braehead fans, and, you know, fair enough. Stuart, are you kind of happy that the elite leagues sort of looked at the situation and thought, we need to try and keep the other teams? I mean, there's no point in having a league if you're going to end up back down to 6 teams, but there's also no point in having a league if you're supporting 2 teams and having to pay them to play, though, is there?
No, and you're right about the comment about sustainability. Teams do need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And I think where we've ended up, as much as I may dislike sort of not having a straight league season and it all being a balanced schedule to determine a league champion. I think what we've got is actually the best compromise, realistically, having thought about it for a few days since the announcement came out. I mean, you've got, if you'd have gone with the 2 of 6 and say, for argument's sake, that Belfast had moved north, could you be happy? Or could you imagine what Nottingham and Sheffield would say if Belfast ran through the Northern Conference and came out champions? There would be screams of that it's unfair, blah blah blah, etc. So, and likewise, Belfast, not getting the monetary gains in from that side of things. So, go into the sort of 3 versus 4 or 3 lots of 4. Geographically, it's kind of okay. I mean, the only real sort of flip switch is actually that Cardiff and Manchester are probably in the wrong places geographically. But other than that, it's near enough logical. You are seeing the same teams less. I mean, last year we played the 4 arena teams 38 times, all told. And this year it'll be 18, which for Coventry is 2 benefits. One, we're not seeing the same teams week in, week out that we have been doing for the past few years. And secondly, they're the better teams, so our schedule's easier. So that there's a second benefit right there. Added for us, we get Milton Keynes and Guildford back in the league, who've been back in the days of the British National League. They were big rivals of ours. And Milton Keynes always travel pretty well. They're only sort of 45 minutes an hour down the road. So it's going to be new rivalries for us and different. So from that perspective, it's quite positive, I think.
Well, I think so. I mean, I know I'm a more sort of hockey traditionalist. I'm not a big fan of league systems. I'd love to see us get into a proper playoff. We all know, what we'll maybe do actually is we'll go through some of the questions in the comments we've had in, and a lot of these things are covered, and we can maybe say in our sphere of knowledge why these things happen and why they don't happen, and what we think is good about them. I mean, some of the pro comments we had, Callie York, seems a fair and competitive split. All teams have something to play for, and hopefully it'll keep the league meaningful right to the end of the season. See, for me, that's a big thing. As I said, that the straight league system would be fine, but in the way things are currently set up, I feel you would have 4 teams at the start of the season that could possibly win it, so the other 8 teams are just playing catch-up. We don't have a system, and I've blogged about this and I've talked about this in the programme before, as Jennifer will tell you, her ears are bleeding about it, about the fact we can't implement a salary cap. It's just not workable in this league. We can't have a kind of level playing field as such. We can't have a draft. We can't do all these things. To me, the conference system kind of, if it's worked right, kind of does make that a bit more of a leveller. Braehead we spoke to Ryan Finnerty a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying the year we finished second and lost by a point was just a year everything clicked and everything fell into place. It wasn't so much, the conference system helped that, but we had a good record against the other conference that year. It was just, again, a fantastic season, and to me, at that point in time, it helped to build the crowds. We were organically growing, but it helped to build the crowds in Glasgow, and it helped to give fans an interest, and a lot of those fans have stayed on since then, even though the following year I think we finished third. This year obviously we've had a really sort of down year, but as far as I'm led to believe, the spending power between ourselves and at least 3 of the teams that are in the Big Four, Belfast maybe not quite there at the moment, but the spending is like 50% more a week, and that's a big gap, Stuart, is it not, to fill?
Yeah, it's a gap that we've certainly struggled. I mean, I don't know the absolute figures, but I certainly think that they are, certainly the 4 arena teams are considerably bigger spenders than the rest of the league. And I think it's fairly obvious when you look at the rosters that they've all managed to put together last year. You don't need to know what the wages are to know that it's going to have cost more. So the conference schedule does help even it up a little bit. I think we could implement a salary cap. That's one of the things I think could be done if the will was there. I don't think don't necessarily think it is from the owners.
The problem is the will might be there on the surface, but we spoke to Ryan about it as well, and when they tried it before, it was always, but we'll top it up by getting your wife a job as well, and we'll give her X, Y, Z, and that's